Summary of The Doll's House by Katherine Mansfield. A doll's house is given as a gift to the Burnell family. Aunt Beryl thinks someone could get sick from the strong smell of paint in the dollhouse. The Burnells' three girls, Isabel, Lottie, and Kezia, don't mind the smell and couldn't be happier with the house. The younger sister, Kezia, sees a small lamp and thinks that it's the best part. The next day, the Burnell sisters can't wait to tell the other girls at school about what happened. Isabel, who is the oldest, tells her sisters not to say anything until she has told them about the doll's house. She also tells Lottie and Kezia that she can choose which of the two girls will come to the house first. At playtime, all the little girls gather around Isabel to hear her talk about the house, except for Lil and Else Kelvy, who are the poorest girls at school and the daughters of the local washerwoman. People in the town talk about the Kelvys and say that their father is in jail and that many kids, including the Burnells, aren't allowed to talk to them. So, the Kelvys can only listen as Isabel talks about the doll's house with pride. Kezia tells her sister to say something about the lamp, even though no one else seems to care. Emmy Cole and Lena Logan are the first two girls Isabel invites to see the house. Kezia asks her mother if she can bring the Kelvys to see the doll's house, but Mrs. Burnell says no and tells Kezia she knows why. After a few more days, everyone except the Kelvys has seen the house. At school, the other girls make mean jokes about the sisters, but they don't say anything back. In the late afternoon, Kezia is at home swinging on the big white gates of her family's patio. When she sees the Kelvy family coming down the road, she opens the gates and invites them in. Lil shakes her head and tells Kezia they shouldn't talk to each other. Kezia tells Lil that it's not important. Lil still doesn't want to go, but Else, who is standing behind her, pulls on her dress and looks at her pleadingly. The Kelvys go inside with Kezia. Aunt Beryl sees them while Kezia is showing the Kelvys the doll's house. She gets very angry and yells at Kezia. She tells the Kelvys to leave and slams the door on the doll's house. It turns out that Willie Brent had sent Aunt Beryl a message earlier that afternoon. Willie said in the note that he would come knock on the door if Aunt Beryl didn't meet him in Pullman's bush that night. Aunt Beryl is scared to death that Willie might come to the door. She feels better after yelling at the girls, though, and hums as she goes back into the house. The Kelvys, on the other hand, run away and sit by the road. Else moves towards her sister and smiles as she does so. She says for the first time in the story, "I've seen the lamp."
About the author. Katherine Mansfield was born Kathleen Beecham in New Zealand, where she was raised by a well-known English family. Much of her childhood was spent in the small country town of Karori. There, she went to school with the children of housekeepers, milkmen, and other lower-class people, just like the Burnell sisters in the doll's house. At age 14, she went to England to finish her education at Queen's College, Harley Street. When she went back to New Zealand in 1906, she didn't like living in a small coastal town. She wanted to get away from the narrowness of her privileged upbringing and go back to London, which she saw as the intellectual and cultural center of the world. In 1908, she left New Zealand for good to become known as a writer. Once she moved to London, she met a group of artists and bohemians and started sending her writing to editors. Mansfield was successful right away. She published stories in magazines like The New Age, Rhythm, and The Blue Review. In 1911, she also released her first collection of short stories, In a German Pension. Only after her younger brother died in the war in 1915 was she inspired to write about New Zealand. She wrote about her childhood in many of her best-known stories, like Prelude and The Garden Party. In 1917, she was identified with tuberculosis. During the last years of her life, she spent a lot of time traveling in search of healthier climates and writing a lot as a last-ditch effort to say everything she wanted to say before she died. She wrote the most in her last few years. Before she died at the age of 34, she finished more than 40 stories and started several more that she never finished. John Middleton Murray, her husband, was an editor and reviewer. After she died, he put out The Dove's Nest, 1923, and Something Childish, 1924, which had many of her stories. Mansfield's work helped to shape the way short stories are written in English. she is still known as a master of writing with exact feeling and psychological depth.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.